We would also like to ask that everyone please turn off your video throughout this presentation. If you wish to submit questions during the webinar, please do so using the chat function at the bottom of your window. And for those using a mobile device, you can submit questions through the chat function by clicking the three dots. In both cases, please send your questions to Q&A host. We will try to answer as many questions as time permits. We have tried to expand our presence on social media and ask that you follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube using @MSCHEORG. If you are already following us, thank you. Now I would like to turn the time over to Carmela.
Good morning, all, and on behalf of the Middle States Commission on Higher Education, I would like to also welcome you to this morning. We have a lot to get through this morning. I'm looking forward to an informative and an interactive workshop. The agenda items will be broken up into segments. At the end of each segment, there will be an opportunity for a few questions related to the items in that segment. There are also polling questions included in a few of the segments. I will begin with a brief overview of the who, what, when, and why of substantive change. Then I will go through the substantive change types, and this includes the new notification and prior approval requirements. I will show you where to find the request forms and give you a few pointers of completing a request form. I will go through the steps of how to navigate in the institution portal and how to get to the screening forms. Then I will go through the steps of how to submit a substantive change request, as well as the required notifications, prior approvals, and lower credential levels. Then I will end with some key takeaways and a Q&A period. The learning objectives set for this workshop are to 1, understand the changes and new requirements around substantive change. 2, understand how to navigate in the MSCHE institution portal in the substantive change screening form. And 3, how to submit substantive change requests and notifications. So by the end of this session, you will have a grasp on these goals. In a recent survey conducted by the Commission to our member institutions, it was stated that the substantive change is complicated and confusing. My hope is that after this workshop, you will have a better understanding and a different perspective on substantive change. So let's begin with the Commission's policies, procedures, and guidelines. The substantive change policy was designed to address federal regulatory requirements, and it also governs the actions to the Commission, staff, peer evaluators, and member institutions. This policy is accompanied by procedures that gives you the beginning to end description of the substantive change process. And the guidelines provides definitions for each of the substantive change types and also includes examples of case scenarios. The substantive change policy, procedures, and guidelines are located on the Commission website under policies. What is substantive change and why is it required? Certain types of institutional changes are considered substantive under the United States Department of Education federal regulations. These changes require the Commission review of a substantive change request and action prior to implementation. Substantive changes are not included in the institution's scope of candidate or accreditation status. The failure to comply could impact Title IV financial aid programs. The Commission accepts substantive change requests 6 times a year, and the Substantive Change Committee meets in the subsequent months to discuss those requests. The substantive change committee's recommended actions are submitted to the executive committee for review and action. Because the review process depends on the readiness of the request form, we suggest you submit your request forms at least 3 months prior to your desired start date, and keeping those deadline dates in mind. Now to the who. The Accreditation Liaison Officer, aka ALO, play a huge role in the substantive change process. The ALO must be aware of institutional changes at the institution that are considered substantive change. So they should participate in the communication and planning processes within the institution regarding substantive change. The ALO submits the substantive change requests and respond to questions from the staff and reviewers, as well as respond to requests for required additional follow-up documentation. The ALO is also responsible for verifying that information about the institution is correct in the institutional portal and the MSCHE website. I will go into more details on the how throughout this workshop. You're probably thinking, how do I find information related to substantive change? The website has a dedicated section for substantive change that includes the deadline dates I just mentioned for submitting a substantive change request, instructions on how to submit a substantive change request, the substantive change request forms, information on the required notifications and prior approvals, information on how to report a lower credential level, the peer evaluator forms, and a list of related resources. That ends our first segment. Now on to our polling questions. Our first question is, when should institutions submit a substantive change request form to the commission? First option is at least 2 years before the proposed start date. Second option is at least 3 months before the proposed start date. The last option is after the substantive change is implemented. I will now begin the poll. I'll give you a few more seconds. I see we have a few more still coming through. Okay, I'll end the polling. And it looks like majority of you are correct. We have 96%, 95% of you saying 3 months before the proposed start date. And looks like 4% of you are saying at least 2 years before the proposed start date, and 1% is saying after the substantive change is implemented. And I'll share those results with you. And the correct answer is, which is 95% of you got the correct answer, is at least 3 months prior to the proposed start date. Again, these substantive change requests are not within the scope of your accreditation, so you must get prior approval before you start the program. So at least 3 months prior to the start date. And so we will go to our next poll. Okay. Your next polling question is, substantive changes requests are submitted to the commission by the institution's 1, financial aid office, 2, chief financial officer, or 3, accreditation liaison officer. I will now start the polling and give you some time to respond to that. Oh. It looks like so far, majority of you We're seeing the same thing. Give you a few more seconds. Looks like, okay. I'll end the polling and I'll share my results. The results is, that's great. It means you were listening. 100% of you said the accreditation liaison officer, AKA ALO. That is correct. And at this point, we will see if we got any questions related to the information I just shared. Questions related to the information that was just talked about.
So Carmela, good morning. The first question is about will an institution that is submitting a substantive change for online delivery be required to do so for this spring, and will the 3 months prior deadline be waived?
If an institution wants to submit for distance education, should they submit it prior to repeat the question again?
Yeah, so the institution needs to submit a substantive change for online delivery of curriculum for the spring. However, they want to know, will the 3 months, because the deadline you said is 3 months prior, will that 3 month period be waived?
Well, so you want to start, I guess if you want to start in January, our next deadline date is November 1st. So that does give you some kind of wiggle space if you want to start, let's say the spring, if your spring starts in January and our next deadline is November 1st. It's a little short, but and timing, but only reason why we want, because the review process is a tiered process. So you have the reviewers that has to review the submission. You also have the executive committee that has to review it. So it's a tiered review process. So it is a timing issue. So if your request, if you send it in November 1st and it's not quite ready and the reviewers have concerns and have a lot of questions, that could delay the review process, and you may not possibly be able to get the approval before the spring semester. So again, just make sure that your request form is complete and ready for review.
And Carmela, I would just add to that we have tried with, in particular, given the current circumstances around distance education, to put as much information on our website under the distance education FAQ section, which is also found on our policies webpage as well. Carmela, go ahead.
I was going to add one more thing in terms of distance education. We made some changes, which I'll speak about soon, but also that distance education request form is simplified than it was in the past. So if someone is considering, the form is a less cumbersome than it was in the past.
And Carmela, I'm going to address one of the questions that actually came in, just so that folks are aware. We at the Commission are monitoring and working with our U.S. Department of Education representative to determine if indeed the flexibilities will be given past December 31st. So let me make it clear that as of today, we do not have any further guidance from the U.S. Department of Education whether or not they will extend the flexibilities past December 31st or not. So a lot of questions that I'm seeing coming in are really around the distance education and the flexibilities. So we're not going to be able to address the flexibilities past December 31st at this point, because the United States Department of Education has not given us the proper guidance. And we had a call with our representative 2 weeks ago around these flexibilities, And still at that particular moment, they were unable to give us the final guidance around that. So the deadline is November 1st. If you need to submit, we are stating to our institutions that using the November 1st deadline does get you into the right mix for a January start. Carmela, the one question that came in as well, in your slide 12, you talked about submission deadlines and sub-change committee meetings. And the question is, does the commission have any type of flexibility or expedited process with those dates? So for example, if I do not meet the date, but I need a substantive change to be in, does the commission have an expedited process?
In short, no, we do not have an expedited
So we also know that there are states and other regulatory bodies that are extending flexibilities for online instruction. However, our take is that the commission is not making a final statement around the flexibilities until we get the final guidance from the U.S. Department of Education. And Carmela, as I've been monitoring the questions for this particular section, I think some of the other questions that have come in right now, I believe you will be addressing in other sections of your presentation. So I'm going to send it back over to you to start your presentation.
Okay. Now, who is ready to hear about the substantive change types? Hear all the enthusiasm through your computer. There are 14 substantive change types, with some having subtypes. The underlying types are types that were affected by the revised federal guidelines or as part of a restructuring. I will give you a brief overview of the types. Number one, substantial change in mission or objectives are changes that lead to a fundamental shift of the institution. Number two, change in legal status, form of control, or ownership is considered a complex substantive change, and the review process is more extensive compared to the regular review process. There will be a webinar on November 6th for those of you that would like to know more about this type. Number three is a significant departure from existing educational programs. That now includes the subtype Introduction to Graduate Programs. So for institutions that currently offer undergraduate programs and would like to add programs at the graduate level, this change will now fit under number three. Number four, alternative delivery method. In the past, we required approval for the first two programs at the new delivery method, such as distance or correspondence education. So as of July 1st, institutions need to submit a request form for one program only. Distance education is the most popular in this category. And so I'll define distance education because it seems to be what everyone wants to know more about. Distance education is when 50% or more of the program will be offered through distance education. So what does that mean? That means the 50% applies to all the program requirements, including general education in the core curriculum courses. And that 50% applies to the courses that are offered in their entirety. And that's 100% online, although the other courses may be utilizing hybrid and face-to-face methods as a part of the program. I know we'll hear more about questions on that. But number five is direct assessment programs. Institutions must submit a request for each of these that are considered a direct assessment program. Number six, increase in credential level, formerly known as different credential level. Institutions must submit a substantive change request for the first two programs that are at a higher credential level than what is included within the scope of the institution's accreditation or a candidate status. And so I will talk a little bit more about lower credential level later, but for right now, if your institution want to offer credentials at a higher level, that requires a substantive change for the first two programs. Number 7, change in measures of student progress is defined as a change in the method of the institution uses to measure student progress in completing requirements for a credential, and this includes the subtypes such as clock or credit hours, semester, trimester, quarters, or time-based or non-time-based methods. And those are new subtypes. And number 8, substantial increase in the number of clock or credit hours awarded. This is for programs with an increase of 25% or more in the clock or credit hours. And number 9, written arrangements, which was formerly known as contractual arrangements. And so we now have domestic and international. We have them broken out into different sections. But for domestic written arrangements with third-party providers that are not recognized by USDE, and that's the key, that the provider is not recognized by USDE. In those cases, the program should not exceed 50% of the program. The commission will not review domestic written arrangements above 50%. A written arrangement is considered domestic if the arrangement is with an entity located or based in the United States. Written arrangements outside of the United States will be considered international arrangements and can exceed 50%. So again, the 50% is for the domestic. And these are getting complicated, and right now they seem to be a big issue because of COVID. And number 10, number 11, and 12 are related to additional locations, branch campuses, and the main campus submissions. And note there was some restructuring in these areas. A teach-out plan may be required for closures of additional locations and branch campuses. The teach-out plan and agreement policy and form is located on the website. And number 13, institutional closure. Institutional closure is for institutions wishing to close the entire institution. And of course, a teach-out plan is required in this case as well. And finally, number 14, experimental sites initiatives. At this time, there are no new initiatives from the department. And you can find more detailed information and examples for each of the types in the substantive change guidelines. Most of you have had distance education within the scope of your accreditation when the pandemic began to impact your operations in March. In fact, 67% of our membership at the time had all of the distance education approvals that the commission required. In accordance with the United States Department of Education, guidelines that were published in March, on March 5th, the commission was able to waive its policy and grant temporary waivers to 173 institutions to deliver programs by distance education, which are in effect through December 31st, 2020. Since March 26th, of those institutions have applied for and received approval through the substantive change process to continue to deliver by distance education beyond the period of the temporary waiver. Another 14 have applied and are being reviewed at an upcoming substantive change meeting. We have, as Steve just mentioned, we have posted FAQs regarding distance education flexibilities on our website. And again, as Steve just mentioned as well, we have not heard anything about an extended waiver for the spring 2021. So for those institutions that decide to continue offering 50% or more of an educational program in distance education beyond the December 31st date, you will need to submit a substantive change request for the first program. And then the next deadline date for submitting a request is November 1st. There are 4 new types, which are a result of the revised regulations. You will find these on our website under required notification or prior approval. Institutions that have received a non-compliance action by the Commission over the past 3 years or are under a provisional certification for Title IV must obtain approval from the Commission for these types before implementation. All others must submit a notification. And the $200 fee is waived for the 2021 fiscal. Now let's go into what those types are. The first is a change in existing program's method of delivery. And that's defined as a change in existing program's method of delivery from a traditional face-to-face delivery to a new alternative mode of delivery. For example, if you would like to change a traditional program to a distance education program, that will have to be reported to us. This requirement is for institutions that are considered approved to offer distance education. Institutions that are not approved to offer distance education would have to submit a substantive change request under the number 4 alternative delivery method. Number 2, aggregate change of 25% or more of a program's curriculum. This category focuses on those changes that result in a 25% or more of a decrease in the clock or credit hours. And number 3, customized pathway or modified programs. These are new programs being created that are abbreviated, customized, or modified. And finally, number 4, entering into a written arrangement with an institution or organization that is not certified to participate in Title IV HEA programs that offer up to 24% of an educational program. Note that in this case, the department is requiring notification or prior approval for any written arrangements from 1 to 24% of an educational program. Now, what is the difference between notification and prior approval? Prior approvals are required for institutions that have been subject to a non-compliance action by the Commission in the past 3 years. And this includes issued or continued warning, probation, or show cause. Or the institution is under a provisional certification for participation in Title IV HEA programs. Institutions that fit into one of these categories are required to submit the prior approval form to seek approval from the Commission prior to implementation. And the forms are located on the website. Institutions that do not fit into the categories I just described should report each program within 30 days of the start or launch of the program. And these institutions submit the notifications directly in the institution portal. I will go through those steps later. And these institutions do not need to complete a form, and approval is not required before implementation. Now that ends this segment, and that brings us to a polling question. And the question is, ABC University received a non-compliance action from MSCHE in December 2019. It would like to submit a written arrangement, and that's 1 to 24% of the educational program. This institution must submit the prior approval form. Is that true or false? I will now launch the poll. And I'll give you a few seconds. So responses are still coming in. I'll give you some more time. Okay. end the polling and I'll share my results. And it looks like 92% of you are saying true and 8% is saying false. And the correct answer is true. Again, these institutions that and this institution had received a non-compliance action from the commission in December 2019, which was a year ago, so it's less than 3 years. So that's why this institution must submit the prior approval form. And we'll move on to polling number 4. ABC University is currently approved by MSCHE to offer a bachelor and master level degree programs. They would like to add a doctorate in education. What type of change is this? Is it a substantial increase in the number of clock or credit hours? Is it a change in measures of student progress? Is it a increase in credential level? I'll start my polling. Okay, I'll give you a few seconds to respond to that. I'm still getting responses in. Give me a few more seconds because it looks like responses are still coming in. Okay. Alrighty, I'll end that poll. And it looks like, and I'll share my results there too. It looks like 1% says it's a substantial increase in the number of clock or credit hours, and 99% of you said it's an increase in credential level. And 99% of you are correct. It is an increase in credential level because the institution is already approved for the bachelor's and master's degree level programs. And adding the doctorate level program would be considered a higher level. So they would have to submit a request for the increase in the credential level. And we have another poll. We're calling this a case scenario. And let's see if I can. And the question is, would this be considered a distance education program? An institution is planning to design its first academic program that will be offered online. Half of the courses for the program will be 100% online, and the rest will be hybrid or face-to-face courses. And is that, yes, is that a distance education? I'll start the polling. Give you some time to respond to that. Give you a few more seconds or so. Still getting responses in. Okay, I will end the polling and share my results. And it looks like 88% of you is saying yes and 12% is saying no. And the correct answer is yes. This is considered a distance education program because 50%, it's 50% or more, so it's half the program. And that 50% will be 100% online. And then the rest of the other 50% will be hybrid or face-to-face. That is why that is considered a distance education program. And we have another case scenario in this area. And the question is, would this be considered a change in measures of student progress? An institution is planning to convert an educational program which is currently offered in a semester format and want to change it to a trimester. Would that be considered a change in measure of student progress? And I'll start the poll. A few more seconds, we're still getting. Okay, and I'm going to end the polling. It looks like. And it looks like 64% of you are saying yes, and 36% is saying no. And the correct answer is, correct answer is yes. This is one of the new types I just mentioned for one of the subtypes under a change in measures of student progress. So changing from a semester format to trimesters is considered a change in measure of student progress. And now we're going to give you some time to have a few questions we could take in this area, because this was a longer, more extensive area. We'll take a little more questions in this area.
So Carmela, thank you. I'm going to ask if you could go to your slide, I believe it's 19, which are all 14 types of substantive change. We've had a good amount of questions coming in around substantive change type number 3 and substantive change type number 6. So I'm trying to take multiple questions here from folks and trying to synthesize it. So, so for number 3, which is the significant departure for adding a graduate program, and number 6 is about the increase in credential level. So people are seeing these as synonymous. So for example, though, if the institution is adding a master's program for the first time, which of the categories, would it be 3 or 6, where that the institution would submit that substantive change for? So maybe a little more flushing out of that.
Sure. And number 3, it's also, which I mean, I kind of gave you a brief overview, but number 3 also includes if it's for a program that's considered a significant departure. So that's, and then the introduction of a graduate program, which is new to this type, it's just for graduate programs. So, which we questioned as well. This is new, a new part of the new regulations. So the graduate program, the graduate programs would fit under number 3. So if it's a new master's program, that would fit under number 3. Even if it's an increase or a higher credential level, if it's a graduate program, you should add it to number 3.
Great. Another question that has come in, would a program that offers less than 25% of the program completely online and the remainder in a hybrid format fall under distance education? The hybrid courses, for example, are 50% online and the others are 50% on campus.
So the hybrid part is 50, and then the online part is 25%, you said?
The hybrid courses are 50% of it is done online. The hybrid is 50% online and 50% on campus. That's how they have split this out.
Oh, okay. So, it's a hybrid program and 50% is online and then 50%. So if
Correct.
50% is online, that would be considered a distance education program. And that's for those online, that's 100%, those courses are 100% online.
Great.
Yeah.
Carmela, I'm going to ask if you could switch to slide 22. And that is obviously around the notifications and prior approval. And I know that in many of our previous presentations that we've done, even at the June workshop that we did around the regulatory changes and our recent President Provost and Town Hall, several questions have come in around this. So could you describe an example, because it seems like number 2, the aggregate change of 25% or more, and number 4 are 2 hot topics here that are coming in through the chat. So could you provide perhaps an example of number 2 and an example of number 4?
Number 2, the focus is on 25% or more of a decrease in the clock or credit hour. So if you have, let's say, a Master's of Science in Nursing, and then your nursing accreditor changes the curriculum and you need to decrease the credit or clock hours, that would fit in this notification or prior approval requirement. I hope that makes sense. If not, I can kind of elaborate on that. And then for number 4, entering a written arrangement, which we were formerly calling a contractual arrangement. And so this is just for instruction. So and I guess it depends on the number of credits in the program. 1%, I guess if you just have somebody that's not participating in the, that is not recognized by the USDE, that would like to do instruction or will be conducting instruction for, let's say 1% of a program could be one course, that would require a notification or prior approval. I hope that helps.
And Carmela, as you were speaking, a question did come in about, could you provide an example for number 3, customized pathway or modified programs?
Okay, this is for new programs. If it's a new program that's being created, but it's, this one was kind of confusing for us, but it's a new program that's being created and you're modifying, it's similar to an old program and you're abbreviating it or you're customizing it or you're modifying it for some reason. Does that help? This one is a little confusing for us as well, but it's for new programs being created.
Great.
So that is abbreviated or customized or modified.
So if an institution is authorized to offer master's level programs, but not graduate certificate programs, what type of substantive change would be required?
So they're approved for the master's and they would like to include the master's certificate. That would be considered, I'm sorry.
A graduate certificate, yes.
A graduate certificate would be considered would be a notification for a lower credential level. I mean, yeah, because it's already, it's not considered a higher credential level. It's still on the same kind of level. So if they want to report the credential level to add those graduate certificates, they would have to submit the lower credential level submission. Because it's still in the same, but they need to report those credentials, those new credential levels.
With the notifications, when did the notification for new distance education programs for institutions that are fully approved for DE go into effect?
July 1st. So if it's a program starting after July 1st.
So this question came in. This is not about prior approvals, but I think it's one that I know we get a lot at the commission, and I know that I used to get this when I was a VP liaison. It's the relocation of additional location. If you are only moving across the street, but the number of the address is changing, but not the street or anything else, do you still need to do a substantive change?
Yeah, if it's a different location, because it's for the location, you're getting approval for the location. Now, if it's across your street and has the same address, it wouldn't require a substantive change. But if it's a different location, different address, meaning different address, it would require.
Yeah, and I can attest to that because I know that 2 years ago, I believe it was, I had an institution who was going from, let's say, 1234 to 1235, and that required a substantive change. That was the address location.
Now, we've had some that was like, say, if you're in suite 2 and you're moving to suite 4, so it's in the same building, that wouldn't be a change. It's the same building, the same address, so.
Carmela, around the prior approval, for prior approval, what is the time frame needed for submission? Is it the same as the 3 months before implementation?
Yes, because it would require to go through the substantive change process. So you would have to abide by those deadline dates. And then again, because it has to go through that review process, and you may have a timeline of when you want to start the program. So it makes sense. I mean, it's just helpful if you get it in earlier because if the prior approval is not approved or delayed, it can delay your start date. So if you can turn it in as early as possible, well, within the 3 months, that would help.
So we have a question. With simple address changes for locations, these are becoming very costly to institutions. Is MSCHE looking at the financial impact of reporting? The answer is yes, we are looking at financial impact. With the whole notifications and prior approval process this year, obviously we looked at this pre-COVID, and so our tiered model structure did look at the financial implications of substantive change. And so hence why we decided for the FY21 year to not require notification payment at that fee level. So we will be looking at our dues and fees model as we do each year as part of the review. And so we will be taking all kinds of internal and external factors into consideration when we do look at the implementation of our dues and fees model.
Yeah, and I would also add that if you look at, which I don't think I've gotten to that part yet, but if you look on our website, it has the cost of each of the types, and as you can see, we've, like Steve mentioned, we do have the tiered model, and for some of those, the costs are totally different. We have some that are $200, so we did decrease a lot of those fees for most of those changes.
So I have another question that's obviously questions keep popping up here on the screen. If a program is going to continue to be offered in the face-to-face realm, and we are adding an online option, is that a notification?
If a program will be, can you repeat it again? I'm sorry.
If the program is going, sure. If the program is going to continue to be offered face-to-face and they are going to add an online option, is that a
Okay.
notification?
Okay, it depends if the institution already has approval for distance education. So if you have approval for distance education, all it is after that point is a notification. But if you don't have approval for distance education, you would have to go through number 4, alternative delivery method. And yes, so the notification, the number 1, I'll go back to that. The change in existing, so that's for both. Like, so if you're changing a program, and so it could be both. You're changing it from, let's say if you're changing it from face-to-face to distance education, but you also want to still offer the face-to-face method as well, the traditional program as well. So you'll be offering in both. So yes, that would be considered a notification.
Great. Carmela, I think some of these other questions, as I've been monitoring them coming in, some are really institution specific, and I will share those with you on this particular section. And we will do our best to respond individually, either through Carmela or through the vice president. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Carmela, for your next section.
Okay. And the next section is substantive change request forms. You are looking at, and that's what I just was speaking about. So you're looking at a snapshot of the section of the substantive change webpage labeled substantive change request forms. The chart here includes the types of substantive change, the links to the request forms, the fees associated with each type, and whether a visit is required for that type of change. There are now separate forms for each substantive change type. And keep in mind that we update the request forms annually, so you should always download the request form from the Commission's website to be sure you have the current version. Some of you will be required to submit a prior approval form. A link to each of the 4 new types are provided on the website under required notifications or prior approval. These forms are shorter than a regular or a complex substantive change request form, though the prior approval process is like the regular sub change process. We will talk more about that later. As I mentioned earlier, there are now separate request forms for each substantive change type. So please make sure that you are completing the correct form. On the first page of each substantive change request, there are instructions which we have found that many people bypass. Just a few important things to mention from the instructions. The request form, including attachments, should not exceed 100 pages. We do not want to overwhelm the reviewers with unnecessary documentation. All requests should be submitted as a PDF, labeled appropriately in a bookmarked file. It is definitely worth repeating that you should always download the form from the links provided on the website. Again, please make certain that you are completing the correct form. There are examples of, for some of the questions, you do not need to provide all of the examples, evidence for all the examples. Please do not include handbooks or applications from other agencies. Instead, include only those pages you would like the reader to focus on. You do not want to overwhelm the readers. Make certain that your narrative and evidence is organized in a way that is conducive to a sufficient review. Remember that the reviewers may know little about your institution, so please be courteous in how you respond to the questions and what evidence and attachments you provide. The response I like to use an example of how not to respond to a question is same as we have been doing. The reviewers will not understand what that means, and will not be able to give an analysis. Okay, that ends that segment. Now we're on to another polling question. And the question is, the substantive change request, including attachment, should not exceed 200 pages, 100 pages, or 1,000 pages. Give you a few seconds to respond to that. All right, I'll end the polling. And it looks like 5% of you are saying 200 pages, and 95% is saying 100 pages, and 1% is saying 1,000 pages. So the correct answer is 100 pages. And that's something new that we added this year to the instructions, because we found that a lot of institutions had just been submitting information and wanted the reviewers to kind of sift through a bunch of information that was irrelevant. And so you should be able to provide enough information and evidence within 100 pages. To the next poll. The next polling question is, substantive change request forms should always be downloaded from the substantive change webpage. True or false? And I'll start the polling. Give you a few more seconds. I'll end the polling. And it looks like 99% of you are saying it's true and 1% saying it's false. The correct answer is true. Please always download the request form from the links provided on the web page. Recently, we received a request form from 2016. I don't know where that form come from, but please always download from our web page. Now we're to questions around that segment.
So Carmela, the one question that did come in is about at what point does the substantive change fee get applied to the institution?
So what happens, you'll actually first you'll receive an invoice. They're sent electronically. And our system is set up to typically send the invoices after the submission. After you submit, you will receive the invoice.
And does the invoice go to the chief financial officer of the institution or to the ALO?
I'm not sure if that changed, but I know it definitely goes to CFO, but it may be the ALO as well. But I'll double check to see if that's changed, because I don't know if there was any issue of it going to the CFO and not getting to the ALO, but I'll definitely follow up. But it definitely goes to the CFO, and it may be copied to the ALO.
So just a quick, so there really hasn't been anything that I think that I'm seeing that's been around this. section. Some of these might be more general questions at the end, but I do want to make a note during this presentation that yes, the slides in this presentation will be made available to all participants on the session today, as well as all ALOs will be receiving an email with the link to the recording.
Move on to the next segment. And the next segment is institutional portal and substantive change request form. Next, we get so many questions about accessing the substantive change screening form. I will give you a high level of directives of how to navigate in the institution portal and how to get to the screening form. So in the right top corner of the of our website, and that's on any page you're on the website, you will find the login button. Click that and it will take you to a login page, which includes the link to the portal. Click the link provided. Note, we are asking that you use Chrome as your browser. This is the view you will see when you log into the portal. You will have access to the institution profile, key contacts, locations, annual update, reviews, and evidence. And let me just mention that the portal, the ALO definitely have access to the portal. Some key contacts such as like the CEO, CAO, CFO, and some other portal delegates that can be delegated by the CEO or the ALO. But not everyone, unfortunately, everyone have access to the institution portal. But for those of you that do need to submit a request or need to get into the portal, here's that information. And let me just mention that there are two paths to get to the substantive change screening form. The first path is located under reviews. And you see I have the little arrows under the review, and you can go and click on either at the bottom or at the top. And once you click on reviews, this is what you'll see. You'll see a list of all your upcoming reviews. But at this point, we want to click on request of substantive change, which is at the top corner. And so when you click that, it will take you to the screening form. Once there, you should select the correct substantive change type and complete all the required fields. So this is just a sample of what the screening form looks like. And then I'll show you what a screening form looks like for a change in mission or objective screening form. So it depends on the type of change of what questions you will receive. And the screening form will vary depending on the type, and it will also instruct you once you answer the different questions if a sub change isn't required. So if you answer certain questions and you, it will direct you that a sub change isn't required. And the second path is listed under locations. You can click on either. Again, you can click at the top or at the bottom in the portal. So if you would like to make changes to an existing location, such as close, relocate, or reclassify an additional location, go to that specific location and click request change. So once you click on location, there will be, depending on how many locations or branch campuses your institution have, will be a list of those in that section, in that location section. So you go to whatever location you would like to change and click request change. And that will again bring you to the screening form, except in this area, it the option close, relocate, or reclassify will already be highlighted. And as you can see that the location, whatever location you select, that will also be already on the screening form. Again, you will have to go through the questions and make sure you complete the required questions and complete all the required. And that ends this segment. That was really quickly. Any questions about the portal or the screening form?
So Carmela,
Yes.
we have a question. If we anticipate submitting a substantive change for distance ed on November 1, should we complete the screening form now?
You can, but the process is I will, if you're not sure, you should not. But if you know for sure that you would be submitting, please complete the screening form. And the reason for that is if I go back to, let's say, here in your reviews. So if you keep completing screening forms and not uploading the information, your portal will be inundated with a bunch of different reviews created. So we want you to wait till you know for sure that you will be submitting or uploading the requests before you're ready to go into the portal. Or because we've had institutions that created a bunch of reviews that needed to be deleted because they were just in the portal, either testing the portal or creating reviews and forgot that they've created one and then, created a new one. So when you're ready for upload, I would suggest when you're ready to upload, that's when you go into portal and create the screening form.
Carmela, we have a question around the screening form. Is there any way to obtain what the questions in the pre-screening form are without having to do screenshots?
No, because it depends. The screening form is guided by your responses. So it depends what your response is of what the next question will be. So it's really difficult to provide those questions.
Yeah, so there's a logic behind each of the questions.
Yes.
So if you answer yes, it takes you to another section. If you answer no. So the way the portal system has been set up is there's a lot of algorithms in the back of that, which triggers one section to go to the other. The other question, Carmela, it goes back to our friendly topic about approvals and notifications. Are notifications done within the portal or from the website?
The portal, the notifications are in the portal. We're going to go through that as
well. Okay. And I think that's it for this section.
okay. How to submit. The first step is to download and complete the correct substantive change request. Then log into the portal and complete the screening form. The next step will be to upload your request form in the portal and then click complete. If additional information is requested by staff or reviewers, you should upload that in a separate section in the portal. And your guidance, you will receive guidance from the substantive change staff on that. That's just a few steps on how to submit. And it kind of answers the questions of what we just discussed about the first step is to complete your form. And then when you're ready for upload, then you go through the portal and then you go, I'll show you the steps on how to upload the form as well. And here we are. So in the background, after you finish completing your form and you're ready for upload, you're already in the portal, you know how to get into the portal, you know how to complete the screening form, and now you're ready for upload. Okay, so after you've completed your screening form, it will direct you to the reviews, which I did show you where the reviews are. But it may take a few seconds for the review to appear in the portal. So you may want to take a few minutes and keep refreshing your screen until the review that you've just created from the screening form is in the portal. And then at that point, when you're ready for uploading your request form, you upload it right there in the portal. And how do you know that your request form was successfully uploaded? We get this question all the time. If you see the view file that appears, I'll go back, say upload, the view file is not there. Here, if you see the view file, that means your form has been uploaded. And at this point, you can download it just to make sure it's the correct form. And if it's not, you still have an opportunity to upload a revised form. And if you're not quite sure, if you may want to, let's say if it's October 10th and the deadline is November 1st, and you may think someone may want to make a few changes, you may be able to do that before the November 1st deadline. And then once you click that complete button, you will not be able to add or revise your form at that point. And once you click that complete button, the staff, substantive change staff will receive a notification that you have completed your substantive change request and that the request is ready for review. Staff and evaluators may, as I mentioned, may request additional information during the review process. The card, which is kind of, you can't see and it's not activated, but once the staff or evaluators ask for additional information, this card will be activated. So when you go into the portal, you'll be like, oh, I can't add additional information because this is for when it's requested from staff or evaluators. And then once it is, that card will light up for you. But if no additional information was requested, it will not be activated. And also, which I don't know if you can see on the right here, it's kind of light, the action notification. So after the review process and after the Substantive Change Committee has met and the Executive Committee had acted, this action notification will be also activated. And at that point, you will be able to download your action. Okay. The approval process, the prior approval process is like the regular substantive change process. So you will have to follow all the same steps I just described, except here, you're going to select notifications in the screening forms. And here's an example how that screening form will look. So this is for prior approval. So if your institution has had a non-compliance action or is under the Title IV HEA or has a program, then you have to submit the prior approval form. And then you will see that there are questions guided. Is the institution developing a program? Is customized or able to, you have to choose which type. And in this case, I chose the customized pathway or modified programs. So yeah, it depends. Has the institution had any non-compliance? Yes. If you would have said no, it would have instructed you that you do not have to complete the prior approval form. No for non-compliance, but then the next question would be, have you had any negative actions from the HEA, Title IV HEA program. And if you answered yes to that, then you would continue. But again, if you answered no to that question, it would tell you that you will not have to complete this prior approval form. Any questions on this substantive change request forms or prior approval form?
So Carmela, there's nothing on the prior approval form, but it is around the submission process that you've gone through.
Okay.
And one of the questions is if we have uploaded a file by mistake within our substantive change, can we remove that ourselves at the institution, or does that have to be done by Middle States?
So if you upload a file, and again, before you click that complete button, so you will be able to override it and upload it with the correct form. Let's say you put in the wrong form. If you click that complete button, then you will have to contact the staff and we would have to upload the form for you, or we'll unclick the complete button for you so you can upload the correct form. But if it's before the complete button is clicked, you will be able to upload a revised form.
Around submission, Carmela, a question came in around, should the request form and all attachments be submitted as one large document or individual documents?
One document. As you can see here, you only can upload one form. So everything should be as one form and with those attachments or appendices within the request form as a PDF, and also it has to be a PDF.
So Carmela, all the way back in the beginning of your presentation, you talked about the submission timing for substantive change as well as the committee. And a question that has been a theme here right now is about does the timing for substantive change on the first of the months that you outlined, do prior approvals and notifications come in at that same time, only on those 6 times, or can they be submitted at any time?
Good question. The prior approvals have to go through the similar process as the regular sub changes. So those would have to be submitted during those deadline dates. But the notifications you can submit at any time, and you do it on your own, and I'll go through those steps shortly. And you can submit notifications at any time, and it's simple.
Okay. So Carmela, I'm going to have you continue.
Okay, let's move on to submit the required notification and the lower credential level. As I just mentioned, notifications are completed directly in the screening form, and be sure to answer all the questions completely. So here's an example of how the screening form looks for the notifications that are not considered prior approval. So the first step is to get into the screening form, and it's the same steps that I mentioned before. You can click submit substantive change, get to the screening form, and which type you will click required notifications. Then the next question would be, has the institution had any non-compliance action? And in this case, it's required notifications. So these 2 answers should be no. If you click no to these, it's because you have not had a non-compliance action, or that you are not under provisional certification. That will lead you to the notification process. And then, as you can see, it's just a few questions. And it depends, do you choose your type? What type of first is what type of notifications? I told you the 4 types of notifications. In this case, I chose change in existing program's method of delivery. And down here, what type is it? Is distance education? Just have a few questions. Then it asks the name of the program, the credential level. You provide a brief description, and it's 500 character limit, and click complete submit. And at that point, you are complete. There's no documentation to submit. There's nothing else to complete. Your notification has been submitted. And to report a lower credential level. Again, the lower credential level is anything that's lower than what you're currently approved to offer. Let's say if you're a bachelor level and you offer bachelor degree programs mostly, and now you want to offer an associate degree level, that will be considered a lower credential level. So in the past, the lower credentials had to go through the substantive change process, but as of July 1st, the lower credential levels can now be reported in the portal, and then it will be included in your SAS. And the first step is, again, go back through the same substantive change process to get to the screening form. And once you get to the screening form, you select report lower credential levels, complete these few questions, the name of the program, the credential level, brief description, click complete, and you are done. No documentation to submit, nothing to upload. You are done reporting your lower credential level. Any questions on the lower credential level or the notifications process?
So Carmela, I'm going to recommend that you go to your next section, and we will run the questions together since we are coming up towards time here.
Okay. So I will end here with a few summary of key takeaways. First, familiarize yourself with the substantive change policy, procedures, guidelines, and forms. Identify the deadline dates for submission and recognize the significance of how the deadline dates will align with your proposed start date of your change. Recognize the ALO's role, and the ALOs play a huge role in the planning, reporting, and submission process for substantive change. Understand the types of substantive change. The definitions and examples are in the substantive change guidelines. Understand the difference between the notification and prior approval submission process. And be sure to submit thorough and complete substantive change requests to avoid delaying the review process. Get familiar with how to submit the substantive change request, and this includes understanding how to navigate in the institution portal and the substantive change screening form. And finally, notifications and lower credential levels can be submitted, as I just showed you, in the institution portal. Congratulations, you have survived the substantive change workshop. Now we have a few minutes to take some questions.
So Carmela, I'm going to try to go through the questions from where we have been.
Okay.
Is there a credential level for postmaster's degree?
Is there a credential? There is a credential level that's considered
postmasters. And what type of substantive change would that be triggered under?
So if you have a master's degree level, or if you're approved for the master's degree level and you would like to offer the postmasters, that would be considered an increase in the increase in credential level.
So it's an increase, okay. Are certificates considered a lower credential level for associate degree institutions?
It depends on which type too, because there are 4 levels. So there are some that are above associate level, but most of the certificates, if you're a community college, those should be considered lower. But there are 2 that are above the 2-year.
Is a bridge program considered a lower credential level?
Yes. Is it under, it depends on what level. Is it just a certificate? Is it?
So it would depend on how the institution categorizes the
Yeah.
bridge program. If it's a certificate or if it's leading towards the completion of a degree. So Carmela, I know we did not go into a lot of this around teach outs, but can you just explain one or two scenarios where a teach out plan is also required with a substantive change submission?
So a teach out is required for the closures, say if you're closing an additional location or a branch campus where 100% of the program was offered at either of the additional location or the branch campus, that's when the teach out plan will have to be attached to that additional location or branch campus closure. If 100% of the program was offered at that, or if a student was able to take 100% of a program at that location, a teach out plan would be required.
Great. So at this point, what I'm looking at are some very specifics. And I also want to thank folks for not only in the question and answer, but also to provide some feedback on some areas that the commission could be reviewing. So for example, one of the areas that came up throughout the question and answer, not only about you notifying us, but getting a notification that when your substantive change has been submitted and the notification process. This is something that Carmela and her team are working on with our IT and with our technology consultants in order to expand the functionalities of the portal and the portal notification. So we currently are trying to do that and expand it. We are also constantly looking at our frequently asked questions section. We are looking at our guidelines and our procedures and trying to update those on a regular basis as we get more and more case scenarios, as Carmela used in her polling section today. We have a lot of case scenarios that we try to incorporate into those. And so we will continue to work with that. So I do want to say thank you to all of you who have also given us some helpful hints. And the other piece, it was around the notifications, not only of substantive change, but when notifications go from middle states to the CFO and or the CEO, if the ALO can be copied on that. And that is another area that the commission is looking at. And so I would really recommend to our ALOs that you look at our future webinar around ALOs. If you are a new ALO, there is one coming up next week. And it is our intention to really do additional presentations, as we call them, the 101, the 201, and the 301, around particular topics for our membership.
And I would like to add that the notification and prior approval process is new to us. And so we're trying to make sure our technology is up and running properly. We're still working through it. So if you have any issues, don't hesitate to send us an email and say, I'm having issues, as we're working through the kinks as well. So please don't hesitate to send us an email. But at this time, I would like to thank you all for participating in the training webinar. As always, we would love to hear your feedback. So please complete the survey that you will be receiving in your email and let us know if you have any suggestions or comments. And we look forward to bringing you even more events like this in the future. And we would greatly appreciate your feedback so that we can be sure that the future events meet your needs. So if you think of any questions about this event, please contact Substantive Change at msche.org. Or you can contact your institution's Vice President Liaison. Also, please save the date for our upcoming webinar on submitting a complex substantive change, and that's on November 6th, and that's from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Thank you all.
And on behalf of the Middle States Commission, we thank you for your participation today. And this concludes our webinar around completing a substantive change. Have a great day and a great weekend.